get to it. Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, July 26th. By the way, welcome to beautiful Grand Forks, downtown Grand Forks, home of the University of North Dakota. Under item 1.1, welcome and roll call.
Weigel.
Here.
Dockler. Here. Weber.
Here.
Mock. Here. Kavami.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Veen.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. Under discussion items, item 2.1, request from Albatross, DBA Albatross Indoor Golf Club for change in location from 2910 10th Avenue North to Columbia Mall, Suite 232, 2800 South Columbia Road. Ms. Dorstad, good evening.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. So the item, as Mr. Sandy just stated, that you have it before you is regarding a change in location of an existing business, Albatross Indoor Golf Club. They look to move from their current location at 2950 10th Avenue North and into the Columbia Mall, Suite 232 at 2800 South Columbia Road. City Council approval is required for location change. The business currently holds a Class 3 license. No fees are associated with this change, just requires your approval. So with that, we would just recommend approval from this to move this forward to City Council of this location change. Of course, this is subject to approval of various departments.
Move approval. Moved by Kavami, second by Weigel. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.2, request for new Class 3 on and off sale beer and wine alcoholic beverage license from KDI Foods LLC, DBA Northside. Ms. Torsten.
Yes, once again, President Sandy, members of the committee, so this item is for a Class 3 application license, which is your beer, wine on-off sale. Application comes from KDI Foods, which is Northside existing business, currently located on Gateway Drive and looks to be changing locations to 2950 10th Avenue North. They are growing their business and expanding their hours and wish to apply for this liquor license. Issuance of a Class 3 beer, wine license requires City Council approval, and attached to your staff report is this application. We would recommend approval of this and move it forward to City Council. This as well is subject to the final review of various departments and our city attorney.
Thank you, Ms. Dorstad. Any comments or questions?
I'll move approval.
Moved by Weber, second by Weigel. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks. Item 2.3, thank you, Ms. Dorstad. Request for approval of commingling and letter of intent for DDA Downtown Street Fair, Rhombus Brewery and Half Brothers.
President Sandy, may I request a recusal on items 2.3 and 2.4?
Is there a motion by Weigel, second by Dockler? Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor to recuse Mr. Weber for items 2.3 and 2.4, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Weber is recused. Yes, Ms. Simeoni, good evening.
President Sandy, members of the committee, I have for you, the first one here is for a letter of intent, noise variance for commingling. It is for the 2021 Downtown Street Fair by the Downtown Development Association, where Half Brothers and Rhombus Brewery together will be serving craft beer, and they are asking for commingling.
Any comments or questions?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel, second by Mock. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2, Mr. Weber is recused. Item 2.4, request for approval of commingling and letter of intent with DDA Downtown Horns at the Obelisk, Rhombus Brewery and Half Brothers again. Ms. Simeoni.
Yes. President Sandy, members of the committee, this is again from the Downtown Development Association. This is a new event where they are bringing the 2021 Music Night at the Obelisk with the Downtown Horns performing, and it'll be the same alcohol vendors of Half Brothers and Rhombus Brewery. These events have also already gone through our special events program and have received approval from the GFPD department. Looking for a approval for council.
Any comments or questions? Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Weber is recused and Mrs. Dockler dissents. Thank you. Item 2.5, request for approval of commingling and letter of intent for Kappa Sigma Military Heroes Concert by Brick and Barley. Simeone.
President Sandy, members of the committee, this is a long-standing event that has been a part of our city. It is with the Kappa Sigma Military Heroes Concert in the park at University Park. Brick and Barley, again, will be doing the alcohol. This is an event that has happened, I believe, in the last few years, and it has been a success, and there's been no concern. It is a way for them to honor veterans as well as enjoy music.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Kavami. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2.6, we're going to create a few special assessment districts. Project A, project number 4704.21, district number 14, permanent flood protection. Good evening.
Hi, Council President Sandy. This is the regular time of the year that we bring in future special assessment districts. We had one annexation, which was Highland Point 6th edition, and all of these projects are from that area. So, any questions on any of them?
Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Veen?
Can we approve all of this?
We can, I can read them all in, but if you want to make a motion, then I'd read them all in.
Make a motion to approve.
Approve them all. Is there a second? Second by Mock. Okay, so create special assessment districts for newly annexed properties. I read Part A. B, Project 5968.2, District Number 291.2, water main on 40th Avenue South from South Washington Street, Highland Point, First Edition. C is Project 5988.5, District Number 627.5, paving 40th Avenue South from South 20th Street to South Washington. And Project D, Project Number 7062.2, District Number 496.2, Stormwater Sewer, South 15th Street, 36th to 40th Avenue South, and 36th Avenue South, end of paving to South 15th Street. There's a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.7, 2021 Justice Assistance Grant Application. Chief, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the committee. I stand before you as I do about this time every year. The JAG Assistance Grant is one that we receive on a regular basis. What we're looking for is permission to pursue the funds for this. There is no local match. If you look at, it's a $22,251 grant, which is a 75-25 split by rules of the grant, with 25% going to the Sheriff's Office and the 75% going to Grand Forks PD. We've outlined in your report what the funds will be used for. These funds have already been vetted through the JAG to ensure that these were applicable purchases under this funding source, and it's thus been approved, so I humbly ask for your approval to solicit these funds.
Sir. Move approval. Moved by Kavami, second by Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Item 2.8, driveway variance for 705 South 48th Street. Mr. Grasser, good evening.
Good evening, President Sandy, members of the Committee of the Whole. 2.8 is a driveway variance for 705 South 48th Street. If you look in your staff report in there, you'll see the building is laid out. The way the developer wants to do the next phase of development on the property requires a third driveway on the property. The good thing is that the third driveway is on 7th Avenue, so it's kind of on a side street as opposed to being on 48th. So even though their address is 48th, this access is coming off of 7th Avenue. The city ordinances in an industrial area just simply require that this variance needs to go through City Council. So we're bringing it through City Council. Both engineering and planning have looked at it. We're recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 2.9, bid award for project 8365, District 352, North 62nd Street Water Main, from Gateway Drive to 10th Avenue North. Mr. Grasser.
Yeah, so we've seen this one a couple times before, creating the district, approving plans and specs. This is the last time you'll see it, which is the award of the bid. We did open bids. Robinson Excavating was the low bidder, $243,983.49. They're 11% under the engineer's estimate, and we're recommending approval.
It's great.
I'll move approval.
It's moved by Weber. Is there a second by Mock? Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 210, change order for project 8336, 2021 public building concrete rehab. Mr. Grasser.
Yes, this is an item that was brought to us through the Health Department mosquito control. If you remember a little bit of history, the public building rehab process is, it's bid by engineering, because it's a lot of engineering type work with paving and things like that, but it's being managed through the inspection division. Brandon Baseplug has been working a lot of the details with Terry Hansen. I know Terry's here someplace in the back. Todd Hansen, sorry. And anyway, this is a slab here mainly for equipment storage, outdoor cold storage. The change order, it's being funded through basically the CARES funding that they have available, so that's all been cleared through finance. The change order is being brought to you because it exceeds my authority on the 15%. The original contract was only about a $91,000 project. This is $40,446 estimated change order. So we'd like to approve the change order and reset the city engineer's authority, 15% authority for the change orders.
Mr. Grasser, from what fund is the money for this project coming? Is it from mosquito control or?
It's
President, standing members of the committee, I believe this is coming from the coronavirus relief funds that was received by the Health Department. So it's in 2146.
Perfect, thanks. Any comments? Moved by Veen, second by Kavami. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 211, design engineering agreement for project 8366, mill and overlay of Mill Road from Gateway Drive to North Washington Street. Mr. Grasser.
all right, you've seen this one a couple times before also. This was some supplemental funding that came through the federal government, passed down to the state, passed down to some of the cities. So we had an additional project that we could do with these dollars. We did choose the mill and overlay on Mill Road. That's all been approved at this point. We are looking at hiring professional services to do the design. This has been advertised because it's a federal project. It's gone through the full gamut of advertising and interviewing selection. So the best qualified engineer selection that came out of the committee was Houston Engineering to do the design. And that contract is $97,655.20. And we recommend approval.
Any questions of Mr. Grasser or about the project?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Mock. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Grasser.
Thank you.
All the heavy lifting tonight. Item 212, Section 2022, or 2022, Section 5310, CRSSA ARP mid-year funding application. Mr. Bergman, good evening.
It is a mouthful. Good evening, President Sandy and members of the committee. What this is, the State Department of Transportation got some CARISA funds and ARP funds. They are 100% federal dollars, and the only thing we can use them for is our mobility manager. So we're applying for the mobility manager wages and benefits for the year, and this is an application. Also with that, we had to have an authorizing resolution to go ahead and apply for the grant funds, which we would need to have the mayor sign off on.
Any comments or questions from Mr. Bergman? Moved by Dockler, second by Mock. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Item 213, Clarity Telecom LLC Cable System Franchise Agreement. Mr. Phelan, good evening.
Council President Sandy, thank you. Tonight I have with me Chris Karn is here from Vast Broadband, and their cable division is Clarity Telecom LLC. He would like to give you a broad presentation to let you know what their company is planning on doing in the Grand Forks market, and that's part of your due diligence to kind of review their application, what they're planning to do in the community. Thank you to Mr. Joe Coyne. He worked on this franchise fee, just so you know, it's in a very similar fashion to Midco's. That's the other cable provider franchise fee that you have. This one is a 10-year term. 5% of gross revenues will come back to this Grand Forks as part of franchise fees. It sets minimum requirements of performance, educational, other things that we want to do on behalf of the greater good of the community. And again, part of this approval is that they maintain a advanced and modern facility over the next 10 years, similar to what we'd require of Midco. They keep renewing what they're doing here in Grand Forks, and they just don't update other communities and leave us 10 steps behind, so that's part of their requirement too. And then finally, what Mr. Grasser is most worried about is that once they get in the city right away, they do it the right way and clean up after themselves and do all those things, not only to disrupt our city right away, but obviously right away goes past private properties and doing the right thing so that we know they're in town doing work. So with that, I'd ask Chris Karn he's the regional director for Vast Broadband, and he's got a whole team that's also on the screen too, but maybe once you do your presentation, we'll take down the presentation. Oh, they're your team right there. And then we'll bring up the presentation.
I'm going to let someone else do the presentation, but President Sandy, committee, thank you for having us here tonight. As Mr. Phelan said, we are looking to build a fiber to home network here in Grand Forks, and we have been working with the leadership of Grand Forks to get to this point. And so on the Zoom call, we have Rich Fish, who is the CEO of Clarity Telecom, Mike Harry, who's the COO, Desi Stoops, who's the VP of Market Development, and Jerry Levy, who's the VP of Engineering. So when you talk about the streets and how it's going to get built, that's the guy you want to talk to. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich and let him discuss a little bit, let him run through the presentation. And I'll still be here for any other questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fish?
Great, thank you, President Sandy, Mr. Phelan, council members, thank you so much. We're honored and appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you folks tonight. Introductions, I think we all have them. I think the way I would describe it is kicking off just our company is a broadband fiber internet provider. As we currently operate in South Dakota markets, not only Sioux Falls and Rapid City, but also in southwestern Minnesota. We have approximately 65,000 customers today, something like that, and we're undergoing just a brand transformation to what we would become known as a DBA as Blue Peak. Our business model, quite frankly, is very simple. It's based on the belief that citizens in communities such as yours are deserving of the same level of choice and service and attention as folks that live in large major metropolitan areas, Minneapolis, Chicago, Denver, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, the reality is we all know that that's actually not the case. And the reason being is if we were all as service operators and telecommunications professionals, we were operating those very large multinational companies, we would be unbelievably focused in what's going on in a Denver market, in a Phoenix market, in Houston, in Los Angeles, but the fact of the matter is they do not prioritize markets like Grand Forks. So that's what makes us different, quite frankly, in that 100% of our time, energy, focus, and capital is really dedicated to these markets. And said another way, we're here, quite frankly, because we want to be here. We want to operate in communities where we feel like we can make a difference, and making a difference is providing a fiber-to-the-home network and a level of local service that's, quite frankly, exponentially better than what is currently available to the citizens. My management team and I acquired this company in February, earlier of this year. We're very excited to be partnering with our investors, which are named GI Partners. Suffice it to say that they are very sophisticated and very serious folks. They have approximately $25 billion of assets under management. And more important than that is they actually are specialists. Technology, infrastructure, broadband companies, not only is that their specialty, but that's quite frankly all they do. And they have a very long and successful track record in owning and providing capital to companies such as ours. The enthusiasm is so much so that they have committed several $100 million to VAST and Blue Peak to expand our market presence beyond our existing footprint in South Dakota. So we're unbelievably excited to be here before you. Certainly, it goes without saying that Grand Forks is unbelievably important to our expansion plans. So we greatly appreciate the time to tell you a little bit about who we are. I'll ask Mike and Desi just to give you a few more details on what the process looks like and how that would play out.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rich, President Sandy, committee members. Desi, if you jump down to the HLD slide. So what we'll see here is this is a high-level overview of the construction we will be performing. It's the kind of the initial view of how we look at the market. We will continue to fill in. If there's pockets that look like they're not covered, we will continue to fill in as we build and as we operate over the course of time. But initially, it's 27,000 homes passed. We also will be serving businesses, so that's probably a combination of residential and commercial passings or structures. So it's a mix of aerial plant. So we will be working with Excel, who we already work with today down in Sioux Falls and in some other markets, to look to pole attachment agreements and get up on the poles in the areas that are blue. And then the green would be more of where we're going underground. And we'll work closely with Mr. Grasser and his team to ensure that what we disturb, we put back to the way it was. I mean, it's a large construction project. It's a large infrastructure project. It's probably a $20 to $25 million capital investment for us. It's all self-funded. We don't look to the government, federal, state, local for funding mechanisms of any kind. We do this on our own. So it is a large project. It is disruptive from an initial construction standpoint, but the teams that we work with a large national partner. They understand the restoration component of it. They're quickly, as they bore and as they disturb sod or whatever it may be, they're quickly getting back in there and recovering and restoring. So just real quick on the next slide, what we look at from a very, very high level timeline. We work in parallel with obtaining the franchise agreement. We put together that HLD that we just looked at and do the initial design, and then we look to have a kickoff meeting conversation with what would be Mr. Grasser's team and others. I think we've already had some preliminary discussions about what we'll do, and we really want to make sure we collaborate. It's absolutely critical that we're all on the same page. We understand the needs of Grand Forks and the projects that we have. When we were there a few months ago, I think we saw there's a lot of construction, a lot of things going on. So if there's large projects we need to stay away from, we'll try our best and do what we can to stay away from those. Or if there's activity going on and you want us to move and be part of that so that we're in at the same time, we're happy to do that. So we're going to be very flexible. We want to partner with the city and we want to work together. We're in it for the long haul. This is a long-term relationship for us, and it's absolutely critical that we get off on the right foot and do that together up front. The next page really talks about, not only is it critical that we're working with the city and the permitting department and the teams there internally, it's critical that we're putting the message out to the customers and those that are in the community, the citizens of Grand Forks. So we have all communications plan that we worked on, that we're implementing in the markets where we're building today, and try and get, mailers out and signs and get out in front of it with the citizens to the best of our ability and communicate and let them know what's going on. So that at a very high level is kind of a nutshell of what we're looking at. The pictures of the team, we don't need one of those, but so I guess we just, at that point, just open it up if there's any questions.
Are there any comments or questions from the committee? I'll ask a question. Fibers, what kind of speeds are you guys going to be providing?
Yeah, I think, good question. Our minimum speed offer from an internet perspective is 500 megabits, and it's a symmetrical service. So when we offer speeds, which is a little bit different from a traditional cable network, you look at 500 as a download speed and some slower amount coming back up. In the symmetrical service, you get 500 down and 500 back up. And we're looking at a 500 meg as a minimum entry point up to 2 to possibly 5 gig, and then we have the capability of going up to 10. And all of those speeds would be in a symmetrical configuration.
Wow.
And I think from a price perspective, we anticipate our offering to be extremely competitive. I think Rich has said a number of times, the ability to offer twice the speed at half the price, and we'll have grids associated when that comes through, but be able to share that internally within the citizens once construction begins.
And we do, we talk a lot about the internet, and that's a big, a key piece of the business. But, we're a cable provider, so there will be a content and a video offer as well. We try and set up packages to align with what people want. We also are supportive and embrace if somebody wants to get their video through YouTube TV or Hulu or whatever it may be. We actually will work with them based on their viewing and what they like and what they watch, and help them get into the right package. It could be a YouTube TV, it could be a Hulu, it could be a Blue Peak Clarity Telecom package that we offer. So we want to do what's best for the citizens, best for the customers, and make sure that they're in a good place.
Thank you. That's all good news. Any other comments, Mr. Veen?
Just a couple questions. Is this a fiber optic cable then? Is that what type of cable this is?
Yes, sir.
And is it trenched in?
I'm sorry, what was that?
And you trench it in then?
What we do is we have a bore machine, so we will go underground. So we'll bore in with the bore machine. So we don't do a lot. We try not to open trench. We try not to open up the roads and the streets and drop conduit. We'll go underground with the bore machine, put the conduit in, and then come back and pull fiber through.
I'm sharing the screen. You'll see there, the green would be board, and then the blue would be aerial construction that we will partner with Excel on.
Then just continuing, your timeline, when to do all the aerial and underground work, when would you project that would be done, complete by?
It's this is a large project. I mean, it's probably a couple year build to complete the whole thing. We want to get going as fast as we can and as quick as possible. Obviously, there's a different, Grand Forks has a different build window than Enid, Oklahoma. It's when it gets cold and snowy and the ground freezes, it's difficult to construct. So we want to get going as quick as possible, and we'd like to try and get some stuff done this year, if at all possible, and then work through that kind of cold winter period where we can work with Mr. Grasser or where the right people are in the right departments to get everything lined up to get going as soon as the ground opens up, and as soon as we can get started in the spring.
President Sandy. Yes, sir. Mr. Weber.
What's the possibility of replacing any of those blue lines with green lines? Can we have more of this underground? Well, we'll look at that. In the overall model, there's, the cost of construction is significantly different between the two. But as we get in and what we will do is we'll send crews in, engineering team in to do what we call walkouts to look at, where we're constructing and how all of that looks. We'll also assess the aerial infrastructure, so the poles, and determine, how much we will have to replace and what will go on. So, it's not this isn't an exact depiction of how it'll be, and if it ends up, there's potential that it's, there's a potential that it's more underground than what's depicted here, then it's, you're not going to move the other direction. The underground's not going to go aerial. The aerial may end up going underground. And this is done in collaboration with Excel? You work closely with them? Yeah, we're going to get on their polls. We submit poll attachment applications. We have an agreement. We have a poll attachment, existing poll attachment agreement with Excel, so we work closely with them. We'll do the application. They'll assess, the impact of us getting on the pole, what's the added weight, what's the load, the age of the poles, and then they'll come back and tell us what it takes to get on. So in that pole attachment, we also have to work closely with Midco and CenturyLink to the extent anybody else is on that pole in the communication space. We all have to work together to make sure there's proper spacing. Appreciate the response. Thank you, Mr. Harry. Sure. Thank you.
Good information. Any other comments or questions?
One last question.
Yes, Mr. V.
Well, question, you've laid out on that map all the main lines. Do you then look for customers and then put each service in afterwards based on individual customers requesting?
No, so what we would do is we will build, if you look at that lower corner, there's a lot of streets, and so we'll have fiber, up and down the streets in the right of way, and then as we sign up customers, we will have access points in that network already established, and we will run what we would call house drops or drops extensions from that fiber that's out in the right of way along the street or backyard easement, however it shakes out, to the actual attachment to the house. So we'll run those drops as the service is sold, but all of the network is pre-configured to have easy access to the network for the homes.
Yeah, if I may answer, true. If I may, I would just say that we will build this and plan to build this network before we have, and make this commitment of, if it's, like Mike said, if it's 27,000 passings, that's probably upwards of a $30 million capital investment. We will make that and be committed to that prior to signing up one customer. So this is not a, if they come, we will build it situation. It's the opposite of that.
And I think I would like to add real quick, the other piece to all this puzzle is, we're actively looking at properties within Grand Forks for, retail space, for tech center, for, having individuals be a part of our team for sales force, technicians, et cetera. So, this is a complete embracement of the Grand Forks community. We were all up and visited with Mr. Phelan and Mr. Mayor Bachitsky a couple of months ago, and started scouting, properties then. And we plan to be in the community long term. This is not a one and done with us. We want to be active members of the community.
This is all good news. Yes, Mr. Weigel.
I'll just say I think competition's a good thing, and it's exciting when somebody wants to come to the city of Grand Forks, and with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Great, there's a motion by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you to all of you gentlemen for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. And good luck with the new venture.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Great. All right, Mr. Phelan, moving on. That was great. I don't know how we topped that, but we'll try here. Item 214, Sequest funding grant request.
City Council President Sandy, I think as we go along, we're going to get deeper and wider on some subject matter. So this is an exciting request. It's a bit out of the ordinary, because similar to what some of the growth fund stuff we talked about previously, but I think it's more good than not to talk about great opportunities like that. So with that, we know the Jobs Development Authority, we're the majority funder of the market capture study, and so that was really to look at where are our market gaps in the community of Grand Forks. And, we probably searched for a while what was the meaning of that study and what was the purpose, and I think what we really came down to is that we identified what's going on in our community and really could identify what's going on as a market. Number one, we have more young families living in the Grand Forks area than ever, which is a really great thing. They're looking for more amenities and more opportunities for their children in our community. And then finally, we're really below national average in two areas. 28% of the market average where we should be with museums and similar activities like that. Number two, we're at 65% of amusement, gambling, and those sorts of things. So really that was a big focus. We are at 100% of performing arts and spectator type events. And if you look at the Alaris and the Ralph and all the things that we have regarding performing arts, we're good there. And if Julie Rigg were here to testify what she sees day to day, she'd say Grand Forks is really great on events and we're low on sites and activities for people to go to. So to that vein, that was informative to us. The other part of that study we identified is that our regional base is 300 miles. That's kind of the network of people that come to Grand Forks on weekends to do activities. And so the other thing we found out with the regional visitor to Grand Forks versus the non-regional is the regional visitor is coming here generally for events, to shop, to spend money, and they are more affluent than our non-regional visitors. And so that was the other thing that was a guiding light to this particular market study. So with that, instead of just putting it on the shelf, we've tried to move this market capture study to action. Okay, what does it all mean? And what we've tried to do is look at infill development opportunities. And I cited many infill development opportunities where we've tried to incorporate, I'll call it the experiential economy, into infill developments. And later today, tonight I should say, we're going to talk about Beacon by Epic, and really that public event space was a precursor to what we were trying to look at. Just want to highlight a couple other things. Private citizen, Weigel was involved in the Hugo's Raceway. That was inspired. How do we get more activities for kids? And we got across the finish line on that. And so the list goes on and on. Previous today, we talked about CTE centers. We talked about tech accelerators. We talked about Accelerate Grand Forks loans. We've done a variety of things, whether it's been growth fund related, whether it's been city economic development related with 2163, whether it's economic development, human needs, quality of life, experiential economy. So I think we've done a really good job at really trying to find ways to move forward. The other part is that we have some areas of town that need redevelopment, and so we've been having ongoing discussions. Downtown is looking really great, and it's only going to get better with projects like Beacon by Epic. It's the St. John's redevelopment, the Lions development. So I think we're well on our way on that, and then obviously moving forward with the water treatment plant redevelopment. We've engaged with the two malls that we have in town. Number one, the Columbia Mall, so we're engaged with the owners and the developers of the Columbia Mall to look at how that can be redeveloped. That project would like to see an experiential piece in there. Their focus is more how can they work with the community with a turf slash court type facility that would drive traffic, not only internally, but from our greater region. We've engaged with, in this case, with the Grand Cities Mall, and again, they're looking at redeveloping their location also. And the Kmart is also being redeveloped by Prairie Development, and they have some partners. And so I've included some pictures of what they're looking at in their particular area. With the Kmart, they are going to be owners of that former Kmart store adjacent or attached to the Grand Cities Mall. The front part of it is going to be a retail type of development. The back half of it's going to be a drive-in warm storage area, so as they move forward. So that's exciting. It's for Curry Development and their partners, that's a $2.5 million redevelopment, and if you look at the site photos, it looks really quite nice. Also, the Grand Cities Mall is looking at some redevelopment opportunities too. So as you work through, just what they're planning to do, we have Mr. Curry is here and Mr. Bjorson is here from Grand Cities Mall. And so if you have any questions about what they're doing, they'd be happy to come up and discuss. So really kind of getting to what can we do as a community, and the Grand Cities Mall area is really important too because it's part of our Renaissance Zone, and you guys have previously approved the Kmart redevelopment as part of a Renaissance Zone application. So as we've gone along, similar to the Columbia Mall, everyone's looking at opportunities to add traffic to their sites. And as we've gone on and discussed, people want to go to experiences. And so part of that discussion, we have had Sequest has engaged not only the mall and the Kmart redevelopment folks, but also the city about would this attraction make sense in the Grand Forks community in our larger region. They generally want to be engaged and attract to malls, and so if you look through their list of 10+ sites, they're all in malls. The closest one is in the Minneapolis metro area, and so there's nothing in this area as part of an experiential economy with this Sequest. It provides an opportunity for looking at ecosystems. It provides opportunities for educational opportunities for children throughout our region as we move forward. And I think it'll really enhance the growth of the development of the property from a value perspective. It'll drive economic development, and again, as we talked previously, experiential and as part of the experiential economy. So with that, the proposal, as you see, also provides for a 17,000 square foot area facility. And as part of their general portfolio, they're between 19,000 and 27,000, so it'd be a little bit smaller for our market. The other challenge as they go through is this is would be their smallest market that they would enter into, and so as part of reducing their risk, coming into a smaller market, they're asking for community assistance to get them across the finish line on this particular project. So generally, what they've asked for, and we haven't gone through all the particulars, is up to a $1 million grant. And in the proposal I have, it would come from 2163. I'm saying up to, and I think it's going to require some further discussion and deliberation on this. And we think this is a good location. We want to make sure we're going to partner with an investment with two groups, in this case, that are going to redevelop that property and really enhance our development. So really tonight the motion is, not asking for a specific dollar amount, but that we get some feedback from you that this is something you want to further consider for us to work on some further details, part of business planning, that this makes sense for us to go down a longer road with Sequest as part of this redevelopment, and also with the partners that are in the area. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Vince Covino, who is the CEO of Sequest, and to have him provide some kind of words about what his company does and what they could bring to Grand Forks and to this particular site here, if he could provide some words and inspiration on what this request is. So with that, Vince.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd be happy to. The first thing that we visit with cities about is the economic impact. So generally speaking, as we look at other zoos and aquariums that have done extensive economic impacts, they generally, because of hotels and food and stays, they're normally first, second, third most visited attraction. We believe that we would be the #1 destination in Grand Forks. #1 family things to do. The smallest market that we've been in is in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it's similar in a lot of ways, and so we feel very comfortable because it's been very successful. It's done far better than we ever imagined. And I think that's because it's pulling people from hundreds of miles away, because there's just nothing else like it within about 200 miles. So we believe it will bring around 300,000 people per year. That's about where our Lynchburg location is in terms of visitorships. The economic impact is probably going to be somewhere in the $15 million per year range. And we just put a multiple on where we believe we'll do between $3 and $3.5 million in gross revenue per year and then we put the multiple that we've seen from other zoos and aquariums on that. The impact on field trips, I think, is going to be very significant. We fully expect it will become the single most popular field trip, and that we will have 300 to 500 kids per day going through there every day. And in the summer, it's going to be daycares and YMCAs and things. But during the school year, we would be, with 1,500 different species, exotic mammals, sloths, wallabies, kinkajous, porcupines, and then sharks and stingrays and giant Pacific octopus, just a wide variety, toucans and umbrella cockatoos, macaws, very diversified array of animals, about 1,500 different animals. And then we also, at every location, we have, we've always done this since we started, which is all foster families get free admission to Sequest. And then teachers, certified teachers that teach for the district in the city get free admission to Sequest. So that's, I think those are the highlights. It's something that people generally spend 2 to 4 hours doing because of the opportunity that there's just nothing else like it within a couple hundred miles. It might be something where they spend 3 or 4 hours, which is a little more what we see in our areas where there's just nothing else like it. So, happy to answer any questions that you've got. I'm sure this is something you've probably not discussed before.
Thank you very much, Mr. Covino. Are there any questions for city staff or for the Sequest CEO? Yes, Mr. Kavami.
I first think this is awesome, great idea. To Prairie and the folks at the mall, I think that looks great. I questioned the storage, the concept and the business of it, and everyone I asked said, oh, that's so needed. So I think you've got tons of customers out there. So I think that's going to be wildly successful. On the Sequest, I think this is great. $2.5 million investment, or at least that's part of it, and then you're seeing the $1 million grant. That is a big chunk of money. I like that you do have some programs in there. Obviously the scale is totally different, but if you think it's SeaWorld in Florida, Florida residents get a different price than everybody else. Is there any, I see that you had some different things that you were talking about as far as events and local participation or tickets, but is there an ability to Grand Forks residents, on X days get a cheaper ticket or a free ticket or something? That's just, for me, it's $1 million, and I know it'll be a huge amount of economic activity, but I guess what else is there to sweeten the pot? So that's question one. And then question two is, what is your lease agreement? Is that 5 years? Are you guaranteeing by accepting $1 million you will be open for 5 years? Just wanted to see that. And then last question is, outside of the Minneapolis one, I'm assuming you're not going to build another one of these in Fargo or anywhere within 300 miles.
Yeah, that's right. We had contemplated 200 miles, but we'd be open to 300 because I just don't see that happening. I think 200 for sure, though. An idea that I think we ought to consider would be September and October are a little bit slower for us, and it would be a great time to offer residents of the city 30% off or some sort of discount. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't know if this is before you, but we had also talked about incentives for field trips for every student in the entire city. And perhaps that's a 2-year thing. So I think field trips is a big one because we're going to have thousands and thousands of students every single month. And so we'd get a lot of value back there. And then September, October would be a great time for us to do something for the city residents. And 30 to 50% off are definitely in the right ballpark. And then third, to answer your question, yes, we would absolutely commit to 5 years, but the reality is, generally when you go in and open an aquarium, you're putting in rebar and steel and cement, and you're bringing in sharks that are 2 or 3 feet, and in 5 years they're going to be 7 or 8 feet, and it is very difficult to move a 7-foot shark. So we're probably going to be there for the rest of our lives. We're going to have sulcata tortoises there that when we get them, there'll be donations because someone bought them as a pet and they didn't realize they lived to be 80 years old. and we will get those tortoises, and they will probably live out their lives there at that mall. And so it's probably going to be decades and decades that we're there, just because once you build it and once it's there, it's just hard to imagine ever going through the effort to try to move it or to take it down.
Mr. Kavami, any other questions? Any other questions? Ms. Mock?
Did we seek this out, or did Sequest seek us out as being a good location?
Council President Sandy and Council Vice President Mock, I think it's probably the answer is both. You know, all these developers, we'll call it, whether you're mall or Kmart, they're all out looking for opportunities to bring, and I think as part of that, what happens is Mayor Buczynski's door is always open for opportunities, and so this opportunity came forward of how could the city help private sector bring this here to us, and kind of fits our needs. So I say it's some of both, but a lot of times it's the private sector leading. They come to us to help them get across the finish line, and we try to do the best we can, and then to get them to you as ultimate decision makers and try to set us up to the best possible way to review these opportunities.
President Sandy?
Mr. Weber. Go ahead, Mr. Weber.
Very good. I'll just mention that, first a comment, when the market capture study was first initiated, one of the things that came up very early on was the possibility of an aquarium. And there was support from local business leaders, private sector, other community leaders, very excited about this idea. And we couldn't see a clear path forward for that, but it was agreed that this could be the type of thing that could be a game changer for our local retail as well. Get people to turn off the highway at those exits. So I think that this is very much something that we should look at and support. Fantastic economic development opportunity. But Mr. Covino, can you help us understand the contribution from the city? Why is that necessary? What would that be used for? If you could speak to the finances, sir.
Absolutely, and Brett, you bring up a good point. You know, you kind of alluded to the economic impact, which is people are going to stop, and when they spend 2 to 4 or 5 hours somewhere, they're going to probably eat before and if not after. A lot of them are coming from 100 miles away. They're going to stay in the hotel. They're going to eat the next morning, and they're going to stop at the shops in the mall, and they're going to buy more stuff. So you really can put a pretty high multiple on there. The businesses are going to love it because we're going to do co-marketing and co-partnerships. They have a new place for events that has a private, Stingray, Shark, window, corporations, will come to weddings, prom, homecoming is going to be held there for most people. It's going to be the hottest place in town, really. It's just the energy's pretty amazing there. As far as getting some help to get this across the finish line, this is something we've done in every city we've gone to, and it's either been the city or the landlord, and generally when the landlord comes in and gives us money, and our landlords have given us between $1 million and $3.45 million to get there. The average is around $2.5 million. And the reason they've done that is just because they're looking at the long year payoff. Generally, we're looking at a 10-year payoff. In this case, we're shortening it just a little bit to a 5-year payoff. But it's really part of the demand is so high. We basically are Amazon proofing the economy, where nobody can compete with the experiential destination. We're going to be good to go forever. You can't buy our experience online, and that's what the cities and the landlords are saying. Okay, we'll buy some insurance so that we're a place to come to.
And a fantastic family opportunity year-round during our long winters. One of the main concerns of the voters, the taxpayers, is our challenges around our retail sector, and all indications where this sort of experiential opportunity could be a real game changer. So I'll move support.
I'll second with the question.
Great, there's a motion by Weber and second by Weigel. I'm not exactly sure what the motion was. Meaning, you're to follow the staff report where you're recommending staff move forward with negotiation and learn more, Mr. Weber?
Yeah, Yes, exactly. I move approval of the staff recommended action. Yes.
And Mr. Weigel, yes, sir, you had a question?
I'm not sure if this is for Todd or for Vince, but what kind of timeline are we looking at? Are we talking a year from now? Are we talking 3 years from now? 6 months? How do you see that working out, Vince?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. We actually believe that if everything goes quickly and smoothly, we could open for Christmas. So that's best case, and that's possible. If the approval from the city came in December, then it would probably be opening for the summer. We believe that we're probably about 6 months to open, maybe 4 months to open on our work, with a month or two for blueprints and city approvals and planning and things like that.
Council President Sandy,
Great.
Councilmember Weigel, this will also require, Mr. Carrera is here, but they would essentially fit up that space. They're going to be ready to go starting construction, I think, in September. So, if they got their approval, they'd be fitting up this space, and then Sequest would basically launch their facility inside that space requirement.
Perfect.
Mr. Phelan, does this qualify for a Renaissance Zone project?
Council President Sandy, I'm not sure of that answer, because Mr. Clary received it on the redevelopment of his property, but considering what kind of property this would be, I think would be a question. We will follow up on that. Whether, essentially, will there somebody inside their store, could they also qualify for that Renaissance Zone?
Right. I think it'd be worth asking that
Yep.
question, because that could be a very significant windfall.
Would. And as you recall, it's a 5-year property tax exemption up to 100%. That's what we've been granting. Also the state personal income, or income tax.
Income tax,
too.
state income
Yeah.
tax, right. It's, for a business this size, it's pretty significant.
We'll have that answer next week.
Great, that can-
And what we're asking for as part of that motion, that we would work on some further due diligence items, and maybe if you had a range of what you're willing to consider as part of a grant request would be helpful too, and maybe as part of a negotiation you want to say it publicly, but something between $0 and $1 million is what we're going to negotiate at this point.
Yeah, Ms. Mock?
As part of the fit-up, are we going to do anything with the parking lot? And any improvements to that parking lot?
I would probably call on maybe Mr. Curry and maybe a representative from Grand City Mall about what they're planning with the parking lot. I'm not sure who owns what either, so.
Okay.
I think the question is the parking lots, who owns what with the Kmart, and generally what the, you two groups are working on.
Because everyone knows that parking lot could use some help. Pastor Knight?
How you doing?
Mr. Curry? Good evening.
So right now, the parking lot is owned by, or leased by Kmart. That lease is up in the end of the month, and then it goes back to the Land of Hope LLC. This piece that we're looking at now is going to kick off some of the development that we've been talking about for a couple of years around the whole property. We have recently signed a contract with Plain Joe Development to continue the next steps of study underground and above, and come up with some designs for the refacing of the entire property. And so we're really excited about this as a possibility that's going to create an entire experience, not just at Sequest, but the whole campus. So the parking lot definitely is part of our plan to redo. I've lost a small child there recently, and but it's a mess, and we know that.
And actually, if to Pastor Paul's point, I think part of, you wouldn't necessarily be repaved. They have a big grander vision actually to redevelop actually the parking lot. So that, as part of, say we hit the Christmas timeframe, the parking lot won't be done as part of, that money wouldn't be used for the parking lot. That money would pretty much exclusively be used for the fit up of Sequest. The parking lot would probably, would not be redone in the sense that you might be thinking until they kind of redevelop the vision of it.
I was just thinking with increased traffic as people are going in and out, that's a
Would you like to see images of the dream of what we're looking at?
Not tonight, but
Okay.
someday we will.
Okay, that's fine, yeah. So we're not going to, our plan isn't to redo something that we're going to put a building on top of. But we will be working on it.
It looks pretty cool.
Great. It does look cool. I've seen it.
Oh, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? We do have a motion and a second on the floor in support of city staff and city attorney moving forward. No other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Phelan. And all our friends from Grand Cities Mall, thank you, Mr. Covino. Appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with something that works for everyone. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, how do we talk that? Item 215, Red River Valley Water Supply Project Interim Financing Agreement Series C approval. Mr. Phelan.
Council President Sandy, I'm going to run through a presentation here, then I'm going to ask Dwayne DeCray. You haven't met before, I don't think, but he's Garrison Diversion's general manager. He's right back there. I'm going to do the presentation first, and then also John Shockley is going to come up here. He's the Lake Agassiz Water Authority attorney. He's going to go over some of the particulars of the agreement. Mr. Joe Quinn has reviewed this agreement and has provided his thumbs up, and then obviously Mr. Vian as part of many water groups, to include your representative as part of WAWA. So with that, I'll just kind of go over the project itself. Again, this project is a state-local project, and so the purple line is the line to basically take water directly from the Missouri River and then discharge that into the Cheyenne River. So we're going to avoid all the federal works that go along the McCluskey Canal. So this truly is a state-local project. You may ask, these are some of the particulars. Again, it's a pipeline project per se, and so there's not a lot of evaporation, all those things you have to worry about, and these are just some of the particulars of what's going to happen as part of this project. It's a $1.22 billion project, so it's real money, and so as part of the legislative session, one of the things that occurred this past session is that a lot of the large flood protection projects got taken care of. One was the FM diversion, which is the largest Souris Valley, Minot Souris Valley flood protection. So really this is the next large project that the state of North Dakota wants to partner with locals like Grand Forks and the Fargo Metro to make happen. So really pretty well situated moving forward with this project. Again, we've talked more about drought in the last month than we have in a long time, and so this really highlights where our map is today. Starting in January 7th of 2020, we had record snowfalls through that month, and so we were worried about a real major flooding. We got up to around 50 feet, but we were really anticipating something 50 feet and greater. So, and then you can see through September of 2020, all the way to today, we didn't have much of a winter. And you can see when that happens, what happens to our particular region, that we are in a drought-like condition. And just to kind of go back to numbers, so we've looked through a lot over these. So we have a Red River permit, we have a Red Lake permit, and then we have a Lake Ashtabula permit. And so ultimately this water from the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, Lake Ashtabula will be used along with the Cheyenne River as part of the distribution. The important part of this map is the city of Grand Forks. Whoops. City of Grand Forks we're the only entity in the region that has an intake on the Red River. So certainly we're going to serve ourselves, and we're going to be a broader opportunity to serve the region, because we're the ones with the delivery device for all this water will be up the Red River, and so we'll be the ones that will be able to take it up. Going back, we had to go back, and thanks to Steve Barron for reviving these numbers. Again, we talked a little bit, these aren't, when you get in times like this, these aren't academic numbers, they become real. So I think we selected about what we should have. And so back several years ago, when this project just got off the mark and it was going to be a federal, state, local, then it went to a state, local project, we have selected 8.9 MGD. For domestic water supply, and 9.5 of industrial. And you can see where East Grand Forks is embedded in our request. So similar to Fargo, they have a metro as part of theirs. Our metro is really Grand Forks with our friends in East Grand Forks as part of that. And you can see how that breaks down. I've heard on the people tell me sometimes people get fired up about, I thought we built a new water treatment plant so that we didn't have to have mitigation. So really the issues we have right now are stream flow. It's not our water treatment plant, even though we are concerned about our water treatment plant. We were on peak right now, probably in late June, we were at 16 going on 17 million gallons per day. And if we didn't have the new water treatment plant, our former water treatment plant was rated to 16 MGD. We'd be having a lot harder conversations had we not gotten our new water treatment plant up and going about a year with 1 year to spare, so that was a great, otherwise we would have been having a lot more executive level decisions. So I want to thank the citizens of Grand Forks. When you look at where we're at, we did call for some voluntary compliance mitigation, and now we're at that 10 to 11 million gallons per day, and our average winter day is 8 million gallons per day. So thanks to the citizens of really doing what they can do to reduce water for the greater good. And again, not that it's not good for the water treatment plant, but it's better for our stream flows and demonstrating that we are conserving as much as we can in Grand Forks. Again, when we looked at what our long-term, this is similar to our water treatment plant. It's, a 50-year project with a 100-year time horizon, if you look at it. And we picked the intermediate range of where our population would be in 2075. So we projected the midpoint at 97,000 plus people, with an intermediate range of how much gallons per day we were going to use per users. And so I think between now and the next 100 years, humans, to include those that live in Grand Forks, are going to use less per gallon per day use as we go forward. So we kind of picked that midpoint, which was the 12.2, which is 7.9 million gallons per day for Grand Forks. And then we looked at industrial supply. So we looked at Simplot, we looked at the air-based institutional use, and that's mainly UND if you look at institute, and then we looked at future industrial loads that we knew, and so we picked that at 5.2, and so that's how we get to the 8.9 million gallons per day. And so I think when we look at these numbers, there's a lot of sanity on them when we look at where we are today. Moving forward, even if you look at that future industrial, we probably thought that was a lot of water, but in some of the conversations we've had recently with industrial users, maybe it's not so much water, so we'll have to see what comes. Again, the Devils Lake Outlet, one of the reasons why we got state funding is that we discussed not only are we a regional center, and water is a really good thing for the state to invest with local communities. We were also receiving a lot of Devils Lake Outlet water, so we wanted a treatment plant that was really robust, that could not only treat the water that would come to us via the Red River Valley's water supply project, but back in the day we were receiving a lot of Devils Lake Outlet water, and so our treatment plant is really robust and can treat this. And so if you look at this, they can provide outfall of 600 CFS. Right now they're at 150 CFS, and that's probably good that we have that, because it's actually filling Lake Ashtabula, and it's filling the Red River. So without that flow, our river would look different too over the last several years. Back to the plan itself, you approved as part of the 17 and 19 work plan $13 million, and that was the state provided a 90-10 cost share. Grand Forks and Fargo, we paid the whole cost share during that time to move this project forward. Those projects were putting an intake in the Missouri River. It was to put a transmission pipeline, and then having this outfall on the Cheyenne River. Why did we do that? We wanted to do some early out construction so we could demonstrate that we had a real project. So if anybody from the federal government ever asked, are we underway and actually doing something, we could demonstrate, yes, indeed, we are working on this project. Again, these are some of the activities that are going on right now as part of the work effort. 19 to 21, we asked for less, and so we only had $7.5 million. So that's really just kind of doing some office type work and keeping the project warm. So we asked for less. It was during the COVID pandemic. They wanted to drive as much money to other projects, and so this project, we said we've done enough with 17 and 19. So instead of asking for the 30, we were good students and said we only need $7.5 million this current biennium, with the thought of we're going to come back with a larger in the future. Again, this is the one we are currently in, and so because I think we were good and collaborative partners, the state actually added money back in, so now we're back up to $89.7 million of appropriations for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project during this current biennium. And you can see where the different cost shares were. The only thing that's really changed is going from a 90-10, the state has agreed for 75-25. So more of the cost share is on the locals than it was under that, that 17 to 19. They moved it from 90-10 to 75-25. And you can see again what Fargo's cost share and what Grand Forks' cost share, which is $3 million. Again, these are the projects. What are we going to pay for? More work on the intake, more pipeline construction, more pipeline design, and land acquisition. So moving the project along. Series C, and Mr. Shockley can talk about this, we've gone from Series A, B, and C, which were all interim agreements, and so we got to get to a final agreement, but we really haven't been, because we don't have a final plan with the state of North Dakota, so each biennium, we've been going through A, B, and C as interim agreements. C we're providing is going to be the last interim agreement, because when we go into the next legislative session, we're going to come up with a permanent funding plan for this particular project, and it'll translate into something of more permanence as we move forward. Part of this agreement right now, we're not sure what the funding is, if it's going to be a 30-year 2% or a 40-year 2%. We're working with the Bank of North Dakota, and so certainly as part of this last 89 million, of which our share is 3 million, I think I showed on there, is that we're looking to try to create a 40-year 2% loan on that instead of a 30-year 2%. Going into the next session, when the dollar amount is much larger, and what we're going to ask for is 200 million under a 75-25 cost share, we want to certainly push that out to 40 years and 2%, because that provides a lot of affordability for all of us to use this as a supplementary water supply. The construction period is 10 years, and similar to the FM diversion is, I think the state has come to the fruition of, and the idea of, we got to get these projects done sooner rather than later, because otherwise inflation eats the project cost up tremendously. So I think they understand that with the FM diversion. I think they'll understand that with this, is that if we're going to get this project done, we got to get it done as reasonably possible and as soon as possible moving forward. That's the presentation on that. I'm going to turn it over to...
I'm sorry, Mr. Phelan, can I ask a quick question?
You may.
So if we're asking for 200 million the next biennium, and it's a 10-year project, and it's $1.2 billion to do it, we're going to ask them for 200 million for the next 5 legislative, in each of the next 5 legislative sessions, rather than $500 million next biennium?
I would say, I think, Mr. Council, that's a very good question. I think it'll be a $200 million appropriation with a 10-year commitment from the state legislature, just so that we say we need 200 million this particular biennium, and then with the understanding is the state's going to commit up to an X dollar amount. They'll commit as much as they can with legislative
intent. Sure.
So that's what we didn't get that again this session. We asked for legislative intent, and the legislature wasn't quite ready to give us legislative intent. I would turn it over to Dwayne DeCray. He can kind of tell you what's going on. I think the other important piece on this, just kind of give a highlight where the project, there is going to be a groundbreaking. I think if you can let the council know, coming soon, and Governor Burgum's going to be there, so I think that highlights that this project is real now, and we're going to get this project done. So with Dwayne, if you could introduce yourself and give an overview and what things look like. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Todd, President Sandy, and members of the council. I'm Dwayne DeCray, General Manager of Garrison Diversion, and first thing I'd like to point out is that this is a cooperative effort between the Lake Agassiz Water Authority, which John will explain here pretty quick. And so we work hand in hand with each other, and we have a couple committees, Lake Agassiz Water Authority does, and so Grand Forks is represented very well on those committees. We have Ring Storstead is on the Financial Technical Committee, and Al Grasser actually chairs the Engineering Technical Committee. And then you have Ken Veen, who is the Grand Forks representative on the Garrison Diversion Board, who actually was chairman of the board when I was hired, and would probably still be chairman, but Garrison has term limits, and so that's how we kind of move things along, but he was a very popular chairman. Just give you a very quick construction update. We do have 3 major projects going right now. We are pretty much finished with the outlet 6 miles south of Cooperstown. That was a large concrete project, and I think they are done pouring concrete now. They are waiting for the pipe, so they'll probably finish up that project in about September. But that major project is pretty much completed. The first bidding that we did on the Missouri River was the caisson for the inlet, and that has been poured, and there's a 10-foot plug that goes into the bottom of it, and 9 feet of that has been poured, and then the finished top foot to be put on the bottom, and then we can move on to the next project, which is the screens and tunnels. So that project's been moving right along too. Right south of Carrington, they're just getting started with the 1.3 miles of pipeline. Just today, we received the first 50-foot lengths of 72-inch pipe on 2 different semis, and we're expecting about 127 more loads. And they're waiting for all the line to be in place before they start trenching. They tell us that they're going to be finished up in September also. So the project is moving along. We certainly want to thank Grand Forks and also Fargo that have been carrying the local share of this project for the first 2 series and now hopefully the 3rd series of this interim financing. We do have $200 million of construction shovel ready. And if you would like to talk to your legislators, because right now the state of North Dakota does have $1 billion in the Bank of North Dakota, that when the legislature comes in for reapportionment in December, that they are going to decide how that's going to be divvied up. And you could certainly help the project if you could get about 200 million of that billion to go into the Red River project and work out some kind of a better cost share than you have. And I think your legislators would be more than receptive to that because they know what it's costing the city of Grand Forks to do this. And the other thing, I guess, is just thank you again for your support. And if you have any questions of me, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you for that good information. Any questions?
Thanks, Todd. Thank you. And maybe the final, maybe have John, he's got a handful of slides, and then we'll take any last questions for the greater good.
Good evening, Council President Sandy, members of the council. My name's John Shockley. I serve as General Counsel to the Lake Agassiz Water Authority. Just briefly, as Dwayne had indicated, Lake Agassiz Water Authority partners with Garrison Diversion regarding the construction of the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. Under the cooperation agreement that was previously signed, the construction, ownership, and financing of the project is carried by Garrison. LAWA is essentially an end user that represents all of the member entities that will be Fargo, its constituents, which would be the Cass County joint, or Cass County rural water users, the city of West Fargo, potentially Moorhead Public Service, and then some of the smaller systems that are along in that area down there also have shares. And then Grand Forks is the other major member entity to Lake Agassiz Water Authority. And I'll just briefly go over. Thank you. As has been previously stated, this is a 3rd series of agreements regarding interim financing. We had a Series A that was previously approved by Lake Agassiz Water Authority, City of Grand Forks, and the City of Fargo. A Series B that was previously approved, and now we have the Series C financing agreement. And as a first principle, the reason that we're entering into these interim financing agreements is the smaller systems haven't quite finished their nominations. They haven't decided who's going to be in and out. And the smaller systems compose less than 20% of the total usage of the pipeline. And while not substantial, it still is important to reducing the overall cost for the other member entities to determine how many of the smaller systems actually choose nominations within the system. As has been referenced, our next step is to work with those systems and get final nominations. We know what Grand Forks' nomination is, and we know what Fargo's nomination is. And so over the course of the next year and a half, we'll be working with the smaller systems to develop that project partnership agreement. But in the interim, to use that state funds, to access the state funds, we do need to finance the local share. Briefly, the parties to the interim financing agreement, Series C is exactly the same as a Series B and Series A as Garrison Diversion Conservancy District, Lake Agassiz Water Authority, City of Fargo, and City of Grand Forks. We've briefly touched upon the work that will be included in the Series C agreement, but briefly, that's the Missouri River intake screens and tunnel construction, Segment 1, and some land acquisition. The total work budget is about $50 million for construction, and then the remaining is engineering, land acquisition, and then professional fees. The cost share split on the Series A, it was 10% local, 90% state. The Series B was 25% local, state was 75%. Series C continues the 25-75% split. As Dwayne had indicated, we're hopeful that in the next legislative session we can work out a better cost share, but this is what the current legislation provided. Garrison, under the cooperative agreement, has to finance the overall project because they're the owner of it, and so they'll be securing a low-interest bank loan with the Bank of North Dakota for the local share. And then Fargo and Grand Forks pay their proportionate shares toward the loan debt service payments. And so, just using an example, if the loan payment was $10,000 per month, Grand Forks and Fargo would split that payment 67.82% for Fargo, and Grand Forks would be 13.39%. What's different in this agreement is that Garrison is taking on the debt burden for the local small systems that have not made their nominations yet. And so they're assuming about 18.79% of those small systems. Other provisions in the agreement, if no construction contract or the project is delayed indefinitely, the remaining unused funds would be returned to the cities of Fargo and Grand Forks. If we're not able to secure the loan before construction starts, contractor invoices would be due prior to disbursement of loans, and Garrison would send invoices to Fargo and Grand Forks, and then those have to be paid within 30 days. Garrison, as I'd indicated before, pursuant to the cooperative agreement, is responsible for the operations and maintenance of the constructed work, and operations and maintenance would be billed separately to LAWA. That ultimate distribution of the operations and maintenance costs, along with the capital repayment, that'll be worked out in the project partnership agreements as we finalize what the nominations of the smaller systems are. I can stand for any questions. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but really the Series C agreement, other than Garrison assuming the local share this time for the smaller systems, it's really the same as the Series B and Series A agreements.
Any questions for Mr. Shockley? Mr. Veen?
Well, no, I would just like to add to the conversation that's been said. We've been working on this project here, as we know it today, for about 25 years, and it's finally to the part where I think Dwayne may mention on Tuesday at 11:30 out near Carrington, I think is where the groundbreaking ceremony is going to take place. So it's a pretty monumental occasion that's going to be taking place. We don't know. We obviously see a lot of dryness out there. As I looked at the monitor, we don't know if this is short-lived or if it's the beginning of a 1930s style drought again. Only time will tell, but we do know from a larger level the economic impact of a 30s style drought today would be about $2.5 billion per year for the state of North Dakota. So having a reliable source of water is critical to everybody. As they've stated, Fargo and Grand Forks have taken the lead to get it to here today. Garrison really is going to be the entity that's going to move the project forward. We will be purchasing water through some future agreements that will be coming forth that will guarantee that we have that source of water when we need it. So it's super, super critical. I'd also like to say I agree with Dwayne on working with our legislators for the long-term commitment from the state. We would really like to make sure we have a very affordable cost share. It's been 90-10, 75-25, and so we got to look at trying to make sure that that's affordable. We need to make sure that the state comes forth with a funding commitment on a timeline so that we make sure we're more accurate, I guess, in trying to project when this would be done. We look at a 10-year commitment. We need something like that more defined, and then looking at the low-interest, long-term, 40-year, 2% loan. Those are the three big factors we have to have, and we need to go after in the next legislative session to assure what we're doing. But it's exciting that we're getting a start, as has been explained, and I really want to say I support this request as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Veen. Good comments. Are there any other questions? I've got a question. Where does Garrison get that kind of money to carry that? Are we all paying fees to Garrison in some sort of, how are you funded?
Well, the Garrison Conservancy District is 28 member counties, and we get 2 mills
from each
county.
There you go.
And so at the 18.9% or whatever it is, I mean, we're really stretching our financial limit, and that certainly is our incentive to go out to these smaller communities and to get them to sign up for water. I mean, that's very important. And with the special session coming up, if Mayor Bashinsky could talk to the governor and explain to him how important it is for Fargo and Grand Forks, and even more so the smaller users, for that 40-year 2% loan, that's extremely important also.
Yeah.
But we really in the beginning didn't have any intention of owning part of this project, but like Fargo and Grand Forks, we think it's so necessary to keep it going that the Garrison board actually came in at the 18+ percent to keep the smaller users in. Now, we are going to go back out this fall and later this spring to talk to those smaller users again. Some developments since this all started, we have been down to the city of Aberdeen in South Dakota. We lost a soybean crushing plant, the state of North Dakota did, to Aberdeen because Aberdeen had the water and Wahpeton didn't. Now Aberdeen's pushing their limit on water, and so they came to us to see if they could get into the project. And so we just had the big coal plant got sold out in western North Dakota. Now they had an agreement with another entity that they supplied them their water. They're not so sure they're going to have to get that water from that entity anymore now that they're under new ownership, and so they've come and talked to us too. So I think the possibilities are endless, but we got to keep it going and we got to finance it somehow.
Thank you. More good information. For people that don't do the numbers at home, our share of $300 million at 13.39% is a hair over $40 million to the city of Grand Forks. So getting a better split with the state and then getting a better interest rate from the state is very important. As a matter of fact, I would consider it vitally important for our community because these are real dollars and it's real. It's going to hit some people and industries very significantly in our community. So good ideas. Everyone should speak with our legislators about working hard and getting some funding in the special session. Is there any other comments? Mr. Veen?
Make a motion to approve.
Great. Mr. Veen moves approval, second by Kavami. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item 216. Beacon by Epic Development Agreement approval, A, TIF development agreement, and B, management agreement with the associated exhibits. Mr. Phelan.
Mr. Council President Sandy, Mr. Gosta is going to step you through all these two agreements, the development agreement and the attached management agreement, to kind of step you through. So we'll take some time with you, if you don't mind, here for the into the evening here. And I just want to introduce Todd Burning and Lance Johnson are here on behalf of Epic Development too, as we have questions as we move through. So with that, Mr. Gosta, and thank you, Dan, for all your great work on this. So go from there.
Thank you.
Mr. Gosta.
Thank you, Council President Sandy and council members. You've been shared what is described as a tax increment financing development agreement. What you're doing tonight is simply setting a hearing date for August 16th in which to consider the development agreement. As part of that process, we have to send out notices to the school district, to the county, the park district, and what are deemed to be competitors. And we'll start that process. You'll see a publication in the paper in the near future. But The one item that I want to point out is the resolution that was attached to the TIF agreement. It's labeled Exhibit 1.59, and the reason it's labeled Exhibit 1.59 is it's referenced in Section 1.59 of the agreement. And what that does is it sets out various findings that you will consider after that hearing, that public hearing. A lot of the findings, they're found in Section 1. Several of the findings are contained within various provisions of the North Dakota Century Code dealing with TIF agreements and tax increment financing districts. Also, it's Sections 1.5 through 1.9 of the findings. Those are contained within prior staff reports that you received several months ago when this first came before the council. Section 1.10 and 1.11 of the resolution, those are derived from city policies regarding TIFs. And then the balance of them are essentially, again, coming from the Century Code within Section 1 of the resolution. And so what would happen, assuming we move forward, and this is something the city would like to approve, is we'd approve the development plan, which is again attached. It basically just gives a very 30,000-foot view of the development that this particular property where the old townhouse used to be would be within the TIF district. That you would approve a TIF financing district for that particular location, then ultimately approve the agreement that I'll go through. I'll try not to drill down to each and every provision. We've been here for a while. I'll try to give the highlights so you get an understanding. First, sections are, Section 1 is several defined terms that are scattered throughout the agreement. I'm going to start at Section 2, which is the development and construction of what are called the public components. And there's some exhibits, maybe if it can be shown, it shows the particular area that would contain what's called the public components, what the city would own. There are two areas. One, the green area, which is a small parking area, which has 20 spaces to it. And then the orange area is what would be labeled the plaza, where the concerts and public gathering space would be located. That hasn't quite been nailed down yet as to the exact location. There is two site plans, one that has it's labeled site plan without video board, and that is without the signage that was discussed, I think, at the last meeting. That may or may not be within the public plaza. And so that's why we've given you two maps. That's really going to be dependent, going to be driving, we'll talk about that in a bit. It's going to drive the extent of where the public plaza, the boundary is going to be driven by how much the value of the property is and how much can be serviced by the TIF bonds. And so that still has to be worked out with the developer. But at a minimum, where it says site plan without video board, the area in orange would be owned by the city. It might go further south, depending on how much value can be generated from this particular development in order to service the TIF bonds that will be issued. Within the development itself, obviously the EPIC will be constructing the plaza. There is extensive city involvement in that construction, meaning there is review processes by the city engineer, city planner, city inspector with respect to all the plans and specifications for the development. There is a start date for the public plaza, which is in September 1, is targeted by EPIC, and it'll be substantially completed by no later than November 1 of 2022 is the target date. The next sections are sections 2.2 and 2.3, which deal with the more of the private development that Epic is putting up. There'll be 3 buildings. The footprint of the buildings are anywhere from 12,600 to 13,000 square feet. The start date for buildings 1 and 2 is this fall, September and October of this fall, and then building 3 is targeted for next fall, September 22. The targeted dates for certificate of occupancy for building 1 is August of 2023, and building 2, November 1 of 2023. Those are important dates because those are the dates where the TIF funding, and we'll talk about that in a bit, when the initial TIF funding will be paid out to Epic. Building 3 is then targeted for a completion date of August of 2024. There are also in section 2.4 of this agreement, there's various requirements for the construction that apply to, particularly to the public component part of it, the public plaza and the city parking area, performance and payments bonds, 1-year warranty for the public components. There is indemnity provisions and also insurance requirements of the contractors that are doing the work for the public component or public plaza part of it. If there are change in plans, which can happen, that does require review by a number of individuals within the city engineer, city planner, inspector, and also the city assessor, and that's because we want the value of this at the end of the day becomes important. And so if there are material changes to those type of plans, it does require, the agreement does require that type of review and approval. We also approve all the costs with respect to the public components, and there is periodic reporting during the construction period as well. In section 3.1, it talks about the transfer of title of these public components, the parking area and that public plaza area. That'll be pursuant to a separate agreement that will be developed with Epic in the near future. And what we will pay, and again, we'll talk about this in a bit, is what's called the total reimbursable public costs. And I'll talk about that in a bit. There's a criteria as to how we arrive at that number. There's really going to be, again, the first time we have to write a check for this is when the public plaza is done, and then when buildings 1 and building 2 have certificate of occupancy. So that wouldn't occur until November of 2023. Also, there is going to be some city space within two of the 3 buildings. There'll be a separate agreement with respect to that space as well. We'll own that space within one space in building 1, and then one space in either building 2 or 3. Again, there will be a separate agreement regarding the city's ownership and the transfer of title for that as well. There is no additional compensation other than what we'd be paying with respect to the public plaza itself. The purchase agreement, I would expect it to be a standard agreement with various conditions. The title, we'd also want to make sure that we've done an environmental review of the public plaza, and also that the TIF bonds themselves are issued and the bonds are the terms of the bonds are consistent or no worse than what we've calculated to determine what the total reimbursable costs are. And again, I'll talk about that in a second, why that becomes important. There is going to be a separate management agreement that we'll talk about tonight. The management of the public plaza will be conducted by a separate entity, a nonprofit 501c3 entity called Beacon Events, Inc. And we'll talk about that in a bit. There is a public plaza CAM that will be assessed. It will be assessed to the developer. If it is not paid, the agreement calls for the ability of the city to then specially assess that CAM against occupied commercial space that's either rented or owned. It's estimated that that CAM is going to be $1.50 per square foot, and it'll be based upon an annual budget for the city's maintenance and repair obligations for this public plaza. Again, the CAM is going to be assessed to occupied, rented, or owned commercial space. So it's not occupied, the CAM wouldn't apply. We're expecting, as I understand, about $10,000 per square foot within each of the three buildings. At least that's the representation that's been told to us. The TIF itself, just to get some information as to how it works, what we have to do is we have to make the request to the county treasurer for her to determine the last taxable value of this property as it's been assessed, okay? And that right now is about $2.2 million. That valuation doesn't get completed until August, till the state finishes its equalization process. So that value will last now until next August of 2023. That's the baseline value for determining the incremental value. What we do then is you will then determine what the total value of this property is after it's been fully developed. You'll deduct that original value to come up with what that delta is, or that incremental increase in value from the approximate $2 million today to, I think we've targeted Mr. Hodak has done some evaluation as to what he thinks after this is completed, it'll be about a $39 million value, okay? And so that difference, that $37 million difference, is the incremental value that gets applied to determine what our tax increments are going to be. The way it's set up is it's only 80% of that. So we take 37 million, that delta, times 80%, and then multiply it times, I think the effective tax rate for property taxes in Grand Forks is about 1.5%. The tax increment that will then be generated from that incremental value is about $450,000 per year. It's that $450,000 per year that's then utilized to service the TIF bonds. So if the value doesn't reach the $39 million, the amount that can be serviced goes down. The agreement calls for those increments, because what happens is the county treasurer will then apply the mills as if it's taxable to that incremental amount, and those dollars will then be paid over to the city and then used to service that debt. If there are shortfalls, and we expect shortfalls to occur in the first several years, because we won't achieve the full value the first several years. It'll take time for the buildings to be constructed and everything to be done. The agreement does allow for the city to make loans to service that bond amount for the first several years to cover that shortfall, because we will have issued the bonds before the full $39 million is achieved. But over the term, based upon the calculations that Ms. Storstad has done in connection with Mr. Hodak, it appears that over the course of the 25-year period of time, it's about a $4,000 shortfall, meaning the service on the bond based upon several assumptions that have been made, one of which is a 4% interest rate, which is, we think, pretty conservative today. But it's about a $4,000 shortfall overall. And so during the first several years, when the value isn't there, the city might be asked to make a loan from their sales tax dollars, which then would be recovered once the value kicks in, and now we've got more dollars coming in than what's needed for the bond service. It's not an obligation, and none of these TIF bonds, it's important to understand that under the state statutes, none of these TIF bonds are obligations of the city. They're basically revenue bonds. As far as when we pay for those public components, there is Section 4.4 sets forth various conditions There are two conditions that have to be satisfied, one of which are the conditions set forth in section 4.4, which is completion of all the buildings, that they've got certificate of occupancies, we've gotten guarantees from the guarantors, and I'll talk about that in a bit. There's also going to be a letter of credit that's going to be issued by EPIC in favor of the city, equal to the total amount, the anticipated amount that would be paid to assure that they complete the buildings, that there isn't any default. Those are the conditions, and also the conditions in the purchase agreement that we talked about are also satisfied. That's when the first payment would be made, and we only make a payment equal to 2/3 of the total amount, because at that point, 2 out of 3 buildings would have been built. But we'd more than likely have to issue the bonds in advance of that. So we'd issue the bonds for the anticipated or the expected full amount, but only pay out 2/3 of it and retaining the other third in a bank account or for the city, and then be paid out once building 3 has that certificate of occupancy. Again, it's a means of making sure that this gets fully developed. The amount that gets paid out is, the lesser of 2 amounts. The total amount that is the cost, the public cost to construct the public plaza and the parking area that the city would own, and there's limitations by statute as to what is a allowable public cost, but it's the lower of that amount or the amount that we're having Baker and Tilly determine is the maximum amount that could be serviced with these increments under a bond. Right now, again, using the assumptions that we've got, that's at about a $6.5 million level. The total public costs are in excess of that right now, and it may then call for the city to expend up to an additional $1.1 million to cover those additional costs. That can't be, because the value is not going to be there as we've anticipated it or expected it, to be able to service the full $7.5 or $8 million of improvements for this public plaza. And so the city might have to, it's expected, or at least from the numbers we've seen so far, is up to about a $1.1 million contribution for some of these improvements on top of the $6.5 million bond that would also be issued to cover the balance of these improvements in the public plaza. Like I said, the security for the performance we've got the letter of credit. We've got some timing as to when we'd issue those funds. Once the buildings are done, 2/3 of it gets paid out once 2 out of 3 buildings are done, and then the final amount, the remaining 1/3 gets paid out once building 3 is done. We're also asking for personal guarantees from those individuals that have at least 30% of ownership interest in the developers or in EPIC. The guarantee is used so that if over the course of the next 25 years, the values don't reach what we think are going to be reached, there is some deficiency in the increments that are generated from these values versus the debt service. So for example, under my previous example, let's say that the increment only came in at $400,000 based upon the values because they went down for some reason, but the debt service on the bond was $450,000, there would be a $50,000 shortfall. We can either specially assess that to all these buildings, or we can pursue the guarantors for that shortfall. Those are some of the security provisions. The parties do expect that these bonds will be taxable versus non-tax exempt. So the interest on them would be, whoever holds the bonds would more likely pay income tax on that interest. Other provisions, default, one of which is if there is what's called a construction stoppage, which means there's no construction activity for a period of 30 days or more. That could be deemed to be an event of default, in which case we could terminate this agreement. pursue other remedies against the developers. And one last provision that was actually suggested to me by our tax assessors, that they don't seek out any other tax incentives while this agreement is played. They've already received the tax incentive through the TIF. Any questions on that agreement? I tried to get through it and highlight those provisions as best I could.
Riveting stuff, Mr. Gostad, thank you. That was good information. I have a few questions. Before mine, anyone else have any comments or questions? Mr. Viet?
I just had one. I was unclear. You said the city has ownership in one unit, or what, would you repeat that?
Yes, the area that is the public plaza in orange and in green, the city will own those parcels. So actually, there'll be a transfer of title. There'll be a warranty deed from whoever's developing this to the city once, and that'll occur once building 1 and 2 are completed.
And then there's the 501c3 that's going to manage that, is that right?
Correct.
We own it, somebody else is going to manage it?
Correct.
Which, that warrants further discussion. And we could, are you going to walk through that agreement as well?
I am.
Mr. Gostad? Okay, so we should walk through that agreement first. Does anyone else have any questions? So who's the general contractor that's actually going to do the construction?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, so
I'd ask Mr. Bernie that question.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a rhetorical question leading up to my second question, which is what protections does the city have under whatever construction agreement that the developers are going to sign with the contractor, so that if we decide 9 months down the road that we want to make a change to the public plaza, that we don't get tagged with a massive additional change fee, for example?
Well, there is provisions in the agreement that the plans and specifications for what the public plaza is to include is to be reviewed by the city engineer, the city inspector, and city planner. So that was the mechanism that I used to try to assure that we'd have the final say as to what this looks like. Also, if there are changes to that plan, that also has to be brought back to the city engineer, the city planner, inspector, and also the assessor, to assure ourselves that we don't make a change that would potentially reduce the value.
Sure.
Over time. So, and the last component of it is there's a limitation as to how much can be paid under those total reimbursable costs. If they want to expend a lot more money on those type of changes, but our analysis says we can only service X amount of dollars for the bond, it's going to be the lower of those two amounts that will ultimately be paid over to Epic.
Sure. I guess I'm just, in general, I've seen project overruns in the past and want to make sure that we're covered. And thank you, Mr. Gostad, for paying attention to that. The bonds are taxable?
What? Because there are some provisions in there that talk about some revenue streams that can be assured through either the parking revenues and the CAM and things like that, that may cause them to be taxable.
Sure.
If they can be non-tax exempt, that would be the best case scenario, because that lowers the interest rate.
Certainly. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Did you want to walk through the other agreement?
I sure do, and this will be even more riveting, trust me. First I want to talk about, again, the first section is defined terms, but it's the management company or the manager of this public space now will be what's called Beacon Events, Inc. And within the agreement, the management agreement, it defines who's going to be on the board of directors of that particular entity. It's going to be a 9-member board of directors, 2 of which there'll be 2 the board members that will be appointed by the city, 2 that would be appointed by the school district, and 2 that would be appointed by Park District. In addition, there will be 3 additional at-large board members, 1 of which will be appointed by the city, 1 of which by the school district, and then 1 by the developer. So in effect, the city will have 3 members of the board of directors on Beacon Events, Inc. And it's that board of directors that would engage employees, the general manager, to run the day-to-day operations. And so the city is involved in that management because they're on the board of directors. The services to be provided by Beacon Events, Inc. here are outlined in section 3.01. It's very exhaustive. I won't go through each one of them, but it's very broad in nature as to type of services this 501c3 entity is charged with providing for the city space. It also requires certain standards for the performance, which are set out in sections 303 and 304. There's financial reporting that has to be done by Beacon Events, Inc. to the city. Monthly reports, including account statements, are to be provided to the city. Audited financial statements at the end of each year. And then there's an annual budget that has to be approved by the city as far as its operating revenues and operating expenses. Some of the operating revenues, there is a maintenance fee that would be charged for somebody that might be using this space. So if I'm going to have an event in the plaza and I'm renting it, there'll be a maintenance fee that would be charged for my rental, and that maintenance fee would be paid over to the city for use in offsetting some of the city's maintenance obligations for this public plaza. Payments that aren't expenses, that aren't operating expenses, will be payments, for example, under the TIF agreement. Those are not going to be operating expenses. One of the things I wanted to highlight, and this kind of goes to, well, it doesn't kind of, it does go to the area that would be part of the public plaza, or what the city would own, is the advertising. Again, the video board right now, it's proposed that Epic might just construct that and pay for it itself. If that's the case, then what they're proposing is that all the revenues from that advertising would go only to Epic, not to Beacon Events, Inc., or not to the city. It wouldn't be included within any of the operating revenues. If that video board is part of the TIF, the total bond, total reimbursable costs, then that's part of the reason why the area would be extended for ownership. The city would own that area where the video boards are, and now that revenue stream would be part of the operating revenues that could be offset against, that could be used to offset operating expenses for the public plaza. And that, again, we don't know where things are going to shake out, because I don't know where all the numbers are as far as the public plaza and what's going to be included and the costs of those things. City events, the city has priority to hold city events in this public plaza. We don't pay any fees for those type of city events. It doesn't preclude the city also from charging somebody. If they wanted to have a city event, the city could charge somebody, and that doesn't become part of the operating revenues. Management fee. There is a management fee that's in section 5.01. It's part of the operating budget that'll be reviewed on an annual basis. The amount of that management fee is not set, and some of the consideration in determining what that amount would be is how much do you want Beacon Events to do as far as management. If they do less, the management fee will go down. The fact that employee expenses are being covered by operating revenues could be a factor in consideration. The way I'm viewing the management fee is it is the amount of money that may need to be covered to get this thing to a net zero sum. If there is a shortfall in revenues versus expenses, that management fee might be the way to try to cover that shortfall. But there is no obligation for the city to cover net losses on an annual basis, cash, from a cash flow perspective. As far as concessions are concerned, the Beacon Events, Inc. would not be running those type of concessions. They would have vendors come in and do that for them, and any revenue from the vendors then through whatever agreements are reached would be part of the operating revenues. There is a process for describing or for handling money. There's an event account, so if there are tickets sold in advance, that should be held in escrow. You hold those in escrow in the event account until the event is concluded, and then those revenues hit the operating account. There's also a reserve account, so if we do happen to generate some net profits, that's where the net profits would be deposited. And once that, the way the agreement is set up is once that reserve account equals 110% of the annual operating budget, no further funds are deposited in that reserve account, and those net profits would be paid over to the city, assuming we reach net profits. Like I said, there is a maintenance fee. That's part of the cost, the rental charge that would be assessed to somebody that might be using the public plaza, and that money gets paid over to the city to assist in covering its maintenance obligations. The city's maintenance obligations here are anything that exceeds $25,000 and a useful life of 5 years or more. The remaining provisions are pretty straightforward. We have, again, indemnity provisions in favor of the city. There are insurance requirements where the city would be named as an additional insured on the policies by Beacon Events, Inc. The initial term would be probably a 3-year term, because this does not become effective until we take title to the public plaza, which probably won't be until 2023, and this is set to expire in December 31 of 2026. So probably about a 3-year term. The city has the option to renew the agreement, the management agreement, 4 times for 5 years in each renewal term. Termination events are spelled out in the agreement. Basically, if there's an event of default by the manager in managing the agreement, the city can terminate the agreement at that point. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the TIF agreement or the management agreement. And again, the TIF agreement, the management agreement is going to be an exhibit to the development agreement itself. And it's at that August 16th hearing that you'd be considering and have a public hearing on the resolution and the agreement itself.
Any questions about the management agreement? Is Beacon Events, Inc., are they already established? Are they the organization that runs the facilities down in West Fargo?
It is not.
It's a separate.
It's a different entity. This has been created. There's going to have to be changes to the articles because the existing articles are not consistent with the terms of the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to amend the articles of incorporation.
For lack of anyone else raising their hand, the billboard, this contemplates that we could sell advertising to anyone, whether they're people that live there or businesses that reside there or events that are going there or anything else we want. I'm not 100% sold that that's a great idea, assuming that a billboard, electronic billboard goes in. I look at The Alaris Center, for example, they don't sell advertising on their board to people that aren't utilizing their facilities. And so, come on up, join the conversation.
Hi. I just want to say on the video board in the PUD, it is on-premise signage only, so it would only be sponsors of that city-owned plaza or the commercial tenants at our development. So it would not be off-premise.
Got it. That's not what the agreement says.
You're right. It does talk about, Section 3.11 talks about advertising for tenants, sponsors of events, or other third parties. So we'd have to remove the language of other third parties. And Councilmember Sandy, you bring up a good point. As I was going through this agreement, I found that there were some internal referencing changes that need to be made. I overlooked them, and we may need to make some additional changes to this agreement, and that may be one of them.
I wasn't trying to nitpick.
What's that?
I wasn't trying to nitpick.
No,
I recognize
it's
you guys did a lot of work on this in a relatively short period of time, so certainly I appreciate all the efforts. Any other, should we set the hearing date for the 16th and Mr. Weigel?
I've got a question, and
certainly,
Mr. Gosted, maybe I missed it, or maybe this is for Todd. As riveting as these agreements are, I zoned out for a minute or two. Why, we're hiring another company to manage this, correct? Why don't we pursue the company we already have in the Alaris Center to manage both facilities?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is that a...
It's an honest question, I don't know. They both seem like event spaces.
I don't know if anyone's had that conversation. I believe somebody's already had that conversation with the...
Council President Sandy and Councilmember Weigel, I think we did have that conversation. It was, and obviously Epic can speak for themselves too. And so we certainly do have other management groups that we have with other facilities, be it at the Ralph or the Alaris Center or other places. So we have the great opportunities to work with other facilities. The argument that I have heard that was probably the most compelling to me was this is part of a private development with our public space, and they felt like to ensure that it was a successful startup and go on an operations side, that they wanted to have control over the management of that public event space, because it was certainly going to drive the private sector growth and development. And because it had been successful in West Fargo in this form and fashion, I think our recommendation was to give them the first opportunity to perform and to drive the market. What we did want to do is make sure that it wasn't exclusive to Epic, but that we could also drive other events to this public event space across the community. But they really felt like they needed to manage that space because they had private investors that were going to be part of it, and they wanted to be part of the management. So that was the compelling reason why we decided to go that direction. As Mr. Gossett has stated, at least to that first term as we move forward.
Yep. And just to add to that, we believe we have a proven model in West Fargo. It's really run by the stakeholders. All funds all revenues that are generated and profits go right back into programming. 100% of the money stays within this project. And we're all about community events between using the city assets or the park district or the county or the school district. They're the stakeholders of the space through the TIF. So we just like to keep that group at the head of the table and operating it. It's really important to hire the right manager, etc. We've had a wonderful success in West Fargo. I just want to say, we're mirroring the model we have in West Fargo. That's what we said we'd do here, and that's what we're trying to do today.
Thank you.
Mr. V? Yes, sir.
Just in response, I understand what you said. The concern I might have is we might be competing against ourselves, is what I would see happening with us managing both areas with different management trying to maybe attract the same event.
Council President Sandy, Council Member Bean, I think that certainly can happen. I think it's greater good, it's positive sum, though, having that. I think with the board of directors, they can kind of set the pace on behalf of the community. I think that will mitigate the lack of, a potential lack of collaboration. I think the other thing, this is an outdoor space, which is unique and different from indoor facilities. So if you look at, you know, the other prime areas, whether it's the Empire, the Alaris, or the Rolf or other, those are primarily indoor type events. So I think this is going to have its own niche and its own market.
So if I could add, will we compete against ourselves at Town Square?
I think it'll be complementary. Yeah, it's a smaller space with this larger space, so I think, again, that's going to be more of a collaborative, because all the public entities were already operating events in the Town Square, and I think these are going to bring just larger and bigger events. And so I think that's an important part of the Board of Directors working together as part of the greater good.
I do think it's going to be really important how that is structured, because we do have two different similar venues downtown, and how they work together for the benefit of citizens, you know, and are profitable enough to survive. All of that's going to have to come together.
Yeah, perhaps people that represent Town Square would also be part of the membership of the board.
Yeah, and we could maybe make sure that happens, or however we structure it. So.
Right. Yes, sir.
Just to speak to that as well, in West Fargo Events manages the POW Plaza, which is city-owned by West Fargo, and the Beacon, or excuse me, the Lights, which is also a city-owned property, and they do use the two event spaces to complement each other, sometimes starting events in the smaller space, and as they grow, move them to larger space, but they're both utilized and they do complement each other.
So, Mr. Phelan, what, in terms of actual size, looking at the picture, I can't, in my mind, figure out the relation in size compared to Town Square. Is this area 1.5 times the size, or 10 times the size, or what is, any idea?
I think it's I'd say 4 times. We can get you a final answer on Monday before
An
that, but I think it's
approximate
about
is
4
okay,
times.
around 4 times. Mayor, something to add?
That's a full-size hockey rink, and I know the one they put in the Town Square is probably half that, so I'll give you that.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think going to Mr. Veen's point, I think making sure that there's good communication between all of the entities, and although Spectra did have to fight to get that business through an RFP process, in general, I agree with the concept that we want this to get off on the right foot, and having a centralized management team making sure that things get up and running and are running smoothly is probably a good idea. For the people that would be concerned about that, by the time they get up and running, it's only 3 years, and the 3 years goes by in a blink of an eye. And so if things aren't going as we had expected, we can certainly go out for RFP. But I would hope that representatives from the Alaris be part of that oversight committee as well. So should we set the public hearing for August 16th? Anyone interested? Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Second by Veen. Any additional comments for the good of the order? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Gosted, thank you, and Mr. Quinn for all the hard work. I know that's a lot of information, not only you provided tonight, but certainly lots of documentation for us to read in the future.
You're welcome, and there was assistance, obviously, from the Beacon attorneys, Mr. Shockley and Mr. Mike Montgomery assisted in the effort as well.
Great, thank you, Shockley, and et cetera. Okay, moving on, last but not least, item 217, ordinance to amend chapter 14 of City Code, Grand Forks Business District, to include the Beacon by Epic into the municipal parking system. Is anyone interested in including them in the parking system?
Move approval.
Moved by Weigel. Is there a second? Dockler? Anyone have any comments? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Move. Is there a second? Second by Veen. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.